India and Pakistan have agreed to an immediate ceasefire after days of intense and bloody clashes, a move that brought a momentary sigh of relief on the region. Yet the fragile peace is already under strain as both sides accuse each other of violating the truce, with explosions reported in Kashmir mere hours after the ceasefire took effect. While military hostilities have paused, a new front has opened, one what economic and political. India has escalated economic and political pressure on Pakistan, withdrawing from the Indus Water Treaty and attempting to block Islamabad's access to international loans. How sustainable is this ceasefire amid the ongoing disputes and strategic maneuvering? Can the fragile peace survive when the battlefields have simply shifted? I'm Ram Morsi. Welcome to In Depth. According to the Economic Times, the recent ceasefire between India and Pakistan marks a pause in the bloodiest clashes in decades, but the underlying competition continues unabated. Both nations allocate significant portions of their budget to defense, reflecting deep-rooted mistrust and preparedness for conflict. India's defense spending, driven by modernization and regional security concerns, contrasts with Pakistan's focus on asymmetric warfare capabilities. Despite the ceasefire, economic measures such as India's withdrawal from the Indus Water Treaty and efforts to restrict Pakistan's international financing indicate a broader strategy to weaken Pakistan's position beyond the battlefield. A dual approach of military restraint, paired with the economic pressure, underscores the complexity of the Indo-Pakistani relations. The ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan, brokered under international pressure, offers a glimpse of hope but remains precarious. Both countries continue to frame the Kashmir conflict through divergent narratives, with India emphasizing counterterrorism and Pakistan highlighting sovereignty and civilian protection. The fragile truce is shadowed by ongoing accusations of violation and a lack of trust. Meanwhile, India's political campaign, including its departure from the Indus Water Treaty, signals an attempt to leverage economic and diplomatic tools to assert dominance. The Guardian's analysis suggests that without addressing the core issues of Kashmir and mutual suspicions, peace remains elusive despite military de-escalation.
After days of intense and deadly fighting, India and Pakistan agreed to an immediate ceasefire following US-led mediation. Yet the truce quickly showed signs of strain. Both sides accused each other of violating the ceasefire, with explosions and artillery fire reported in the Kashmir region shortly after the agreement. This ongoing exchange of accusations underscores the volatility of the situation despite the formal ceasefire. This multifaceted confrontation reflects broader geopolitical rivalries, particularly involving China and the United States. Pakistan's strategic significance as a gateway for China's Belt and Road Initiative adds complexity to the conflict, as regional and global powers weigh their interests. As India leverages its growing economic and diplomatic influence to pressure on Pakistan, in a significant escalation, India withdrew from the Indus Water Treaty, a 1960 agreement crucial for Pakistan's water supply, a move Islamabad condemned as an act of war. Finally, India has national financial institutions to block Pakistan's access to critical loans, including a $7 billion IMF package vital for Pakistan's economic stability. These efforts reflect India's broader strategy to weaken Pakistan through economic means amid military de-escalation. The ceasefire, fragile and contested, underscores the urgent need for sustained dialogue and confidence-building measures. Without addressing the core disputes, especially Kashmir and water sharing and the geopolitical stakes, peace remains elusive. The recent developments reveal that the India-Pakistan conflict is no longer a bilateral dispute, but a pivotal element in a shifting global power landscape.
Let's better understand the implications of the ceasefire and the broader geopolitical dynamics. We're joined by Mr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist. Thank you, sir, for joining us from Cairo.
Thank you for having me, Rehan.
Thank you so much, sir. First, let's start off by asking about the ceasefire agreement itself that's been reached by India and Pakistan. How significant is this? Do you think that the ceasefire agreement will hold?
India and Pakistan, for the better part of a week or a little bit more, were the closest they have ever been to an all-out war, maybe since 1971. Even the clashes of 1999, which are known as the Kargil War, was a border conflict that lasted for a few months. However, it was only limited to the Kargil area, the Kargil mountains inside the Kashmir area. What we have witnessed between India and Pakistan is clashes across the entire line of control in Kashmir and also across the border between the Punjab regions of India and the Punjab region of Pakistan. We have strikes. So, and this is rather unprecedented in the previous clashes that have occurred between the two countries throughout the past 25 years. So what has diffused the situation was a decisive intervention from global powers who have seen that this was never going to be convenient, a war between India and Pakistan. India, in my view, through its escalation against Pakistan after the Kashmir terrorist attacks, basically staging a limited escalation through which they can score certain propaganda victories that will further the political position and standing of Narendra Modi and his party, Prime Minister Modi and his party, Bharatiya Janata. However, and also at the same time, he can cover for the security failure that led to the Kashmir attacks. However, what happened was Pakistan decided to retaliate, which basically offset the entire equation put forward by the Indians. They tacit American support because humiliating Pakistan and trying to inflict some sort of quick defeat on them would be detrimental to Chinese interests. And of course, as we all know, Pakistan is a key ally of China and is a key artery of its Belt and Road Initiative. However, when it became clear that this would become an actual war, the Indians do not want an actual war because their army did not perform very well during these exchanges, and Pakistan has proven that it can resist the Indian attacks and retaliate to them. And also the Americans do not want the prospect of an all-out war between two nuclear powers, which could be detrimental to their interests in the region and could be detrimental to India's standing as well, because India will suffer from an economic recession if it enters an all-out war, and then it will have global economic ramifications since India is one of the largest economies in the world, and it will not be able to compete on par with China, which is the American design for containing China economically. On the other hand, Pakistan knows that an all-out war will ultimately end either in a nuclear exchange or in an Indian victory, because India is way more powerful than Pakistan in comprehensive terms, whether militarily or economically. And of course, China, just my final point, yes. China does not want a war, because even though it supports Pakistan and it has its very tense relationship with India, it knows that a war on its southern border will be detrimental to its interests.
Yes. Now, so you've kind of talked about, the interests of the Indian side, the Chinese, US, and slightly touched on Pakistan. From your analysis, what do you believe is Pakistan's perspective when it comes to the ceasefire agreement? How do they view it so far? And is this enough to, ease the tensions?
Yeah, I think so. Pakistan has everything to win from this agreement because no matter what the Indian pretexts or justifications were, they carry out an act of aggression against Pakistan in terms of international law by launching an act of war against them through these missile strikes. What the Pakistanis did is that they stood their ground, they retaliated, they proved that they can defend their own national sovereignty while at the same time adopting a very sound diplomatic course, which was open for a political settlement without giving in to any severe concessions. So Pakistan has a lot to win from this. Even Shahbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, proclaimed victory in this confrontation yesterday. So it's definitely a win for him domestically and on the international stage as well. Also, the Chinese did win this round by avoiding a war and by having Pakistan walk out of this politically victorious of some sort. But that does not mean that Pakistan will not face severe obstacles ahead, because India's abrogation, unilateral abrogation of the Indus River Waters Treaty still remains a standing cause for further conflict between India and Pakistan. 80% of Pakistan's water supply comes from the Indus River, and India controls through this treaty, basically, and through its geography, the flow of the river from China to India all the way to Pakistan. So if they decide to halt the water supplies, this could cause a humanitarian disaster. It will basically be some sort of hydraulic hydrogenocide of some sort, So the weaponization of water still is a problem for the Pakistanis. The Indians have for a very long time wanted to review the provisions of the 1960 Indus Valley River Treaty. And now is a good time because India said that the nullification of the treaty is still intact. So this means that they will have to renegotiate the Indus Water Treaty issue as part of a larger settlement. So maybe India will ask Pakistan for further concessions and territorial concessions in Kashmir, security guarantees in return for. Please go ahead.
So, sir, you talked about the idea of Pakistan considering this a win and all of that, and you also touched on the Indus Water Treaty. Now, what you just said is probably why India is justifying the withdrawal from the Indus Water Treaty, that they want to somehow find a way to be more just or whatever it is. But do you think that this is actually being used as a tool to pressure the Pakistanis and as a war tool that is sort of indirect economically and maybe even humanitarian-wise?
Yes, unfortunately, we are witnessing for first time in maybe recent history, the clear weaponization of water and the utilization of water, an artery of life, basically, as a tool of political pressure. And this is a very dangerous precedent.
Do you think this is caused by the violations that have been done in Gaza by the Israelis, where no one actually put them or made them accountable for, weaponizing, food, aid, and all of that? Now, it's free game for everyone.
Unfortunately, the lawlessness that has consumed the world over the past 5 years, including during the Russo-Ukrainian war and the Israeli genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, and the Israeli acts of aggression, wars of aggression against Lebanon, their transgressions against Syria and Yemen. These are clear examples of impunity and lack of accountability. So when there is no accountability and there is no respect or upholding of the principles and basic foundations of international law, then this is the ultimate result. So what we are seeing right now in India is between India and Pakistan is a manifestation of that from both sides. Pakistan continues to support terrorist organizations in the Indian part of Kashmir, and this is unacceptable to any sound thinking person. And on the other hand, India chooses to also, by the way, supports terrorist organizations in Pakistan's Balochistan, for example, and also they are just blackmailing Pakistan with the artery of life, with water now. So this is a very dangerous precedent, and it could actually be a cause of a future conflict, an actual conflict this time, between Pakistan and India if the two countries do not come to terms and agree on a water sharing agreement. The problem is India, I don't know that, but I expect it to do that in order to save face and try to garner anything out of this escalation that it has not won nothing from so far. They have not achieved anything through this week of hostilities. Maybe they will try to pressure the Pakistanis to give them concessions in Kashmir in return for the resumption of the water flows in accordance with the Indus Valley Treaty. And also to give you further, to put things into perspective, India claims sovereignty over the entirety of Pakistan, of Kashmir. Yes. It says that Kashmir is part of India proper, the entirety of Kashmir, yet it only controls about 55% of the territory. Pakistan controls about 35% of Kashmir. They do not claim that this is part of Pakistan. All they say is that we are occupying this part because we want to liberate the rest of Kashmir and let the Kashmiris, give the Kashmiris a chance to voice their own opinion about their own, about which country they could belong, basically exercising their right to self-determination, whether through a referendum through which they can join India, gain independence, or join Pakistan. So the claims over Kashmir, the Pakistani claims over Kashmir, are much lighter and weaker than the Indian claims, which claims that the entirety of Kashmir is part of India. And also, we should never forget that China controls about 10% of Kashmir, yes, and considers the 10% of controls part of the People's Republic of China. Yet these areas that the Chinese control are largely uninhabited, so they do not really create a problem for the Chinese as they do for India or Pakistan. So maybe Kashmir and the Indus Water Valley Treaty will be on the table, and maybe the Americans. Trump hinted that he will try to mediate an end to the Kashmir conflict, which is about 78 years old. He said it's 1,000 years old, but I think President Trump has a certain impairment when it comes to counting and measuring history. So I think he believes he can resolve this 78-year-long conflict. So who knows? Maybe we might see a process under the auspices of the United States.
Well, I mean, given that there's a lot happening, like you said, there's a lot to unpack here, but also in what ways does the Indians' economic pressure complement the military and diplomatic strategies when they're dealing with Pakistan, especially with other factors like the United States trying to de-escalate the situation, but the Indians are still trying to keep up the pressure?
Yes, India tried over the past a week, I think, to obstruct Pakistan's access to its IMF loans. And India does have a presence on the IMF board of governors, like many other countries, and they tried to obstruct the clearing or the approval of the $7 billion loan for Pakistan. However, the IMF ultimately decided to grant Pakistan the money, and the Indian effort did not yield any results. But this shows to what extent India is going in order to try to economically pressure Pakistan. Pakistan is suffering from an acute economic crisis, and the IMF is presenting them with a relief package of loans so that they can resolve or at least alleviate their fiscal problems and challenges. Yet India was even trying to stifle that in order to strangle Pakistan economically as much as it could, in addition, of course, to the military action, which is very detrimental to the Pakistani economy. The airspace of Pakistan was closed for the better part of last week. Many Pakistani ports were closed. So, of course, this did have a severe effect on the Pakistani economy. Yet it also had a severe effect on the Indian economy as well, because war is always a two-way street. India lost about $1 billion in losses over the past few days of hostilities between it and Pakistan. So I think that the Indians were trying to apply a comprehensive scheme of pressure, maximum pressure against Pakistan. But I think so far it has not yielded any results that the Indian government can market as a victory or as a success. If anything, they were spectacularly embarrassed on the battlefield when many of their jet fighters and drones were shot down, and when their attacks and their missile strikes did not neutralize Pakistani capabilities, and Pakistan was able to hit them back with missile strikes, inflicting casualties as well.
Well, sir, I mean, like these maneuvers, whether it be, the withdrawal from the Indus Water Treaty or attempts to strangle one party or the other economically, have been described as acts of war. And also we're starting to see media, whether it be in India or Pakistan, drum support for, ethno-nationalistic sentiments. What does this mean for both sides, and could this increase the tensions and possibly escalate further the situation?
Well, war in general is always a terrible event. So please do not misunderstand what I'm about to say or misinterpret it. But watching the Indian and Pakistani medias take on the latest round of hostilities was rather hilarious, because they were so absurd in their nationalistic rhetoric that they have departed from all of the core principles of rationality and logic, and of course, veracity and truthfulness. And they engaged in a state, each country, each media apparatus in each country, the media outlets in general in both countries, were sunk into a state of jingoism and chauvinism, basically, adopting a very nationalistic and militaristic discourse, which was, by the way, hyping up the emotions of the general public, which made it very hard for either the Indian government or the Pakistani government to walk back from escalation. Because if either part flinches first and walks back from escalation before the other, it will be perceived by an angry and hyped up populace, nationalistic populace, that it is a defeat, and then this government's fate will be sealed, of course, in a spectacular loss in the next election, or even its overthrow. I think that the media and India played a very, very, very negative role, a very harmful role in this regard. I hope that both countries will stop and try to review the principles and the code of ethics or code of conduct of their press in general and their media, because it nearly helped push both countries into an actual open war that could have had unknown and definitely terrible consequences.
Okay, now back to Pakistan's response diplomatically and economically. How are they doing that to the Indian efforts to block access, for instance, to international loans, including lobbying IMF, and the attempts to have the Pakistanis relisted on the Financial Action Task Force grey list? How are they responding to this, and what efforts are they trying to do to avoid such actions in the future?
Now, the Pakistanis, of course, are trying to lobby global powers in order to receive these packages and the economic aid in general, and the loans as well. They have a very good relationship with China. China has played a role in supporting Pakistan economically. It has invested tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars inside Pakistan. They have given them economic aid and loans before. Also, the IMF has cleared its $7 billion loan to Pakistan. So it seems that the Pakistani efforts to subvert Indian attempts to economically stifle them have largely succeeded. And it seems that now they are receiving economic aid, because if the economic downturn in Pakistan turns into a collapse of the economy, which could lead eventually to a collapse of law and order in society, nobody wants to see that in a country that owns about 170 nuclear warheads, because having chaos in such a country means that these weapons can fall in the wrong hands. So I think that the international community has a vested interest in keeping Pakistan alive, preventing its economic collapse, and helping it deal with its economic ailments, whether the West or the East, China or the West. Yes. Both of them are eager to support Pakistan economically to some extent.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, for sharing your valuable insights and your time. As India and Pakistan navigate this tenacious ceasefire, the path forward remains uncertain. Military calm has momentarily returned, but economic and political tensions persist, underscoring the complexity of their relationship. Sustained dialogue, mutual trust, and addressing core disputes like Kashmir and water sharing are essential to prevent a relapse into conflict. This ends this episode of In Depth. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.